collection that we use consistently, obviously, is knives. Now, knives, you can have a whole chefing sequence of knives. If you are a chef, you'll know a lot more about this than what I do, but from just an average cook that cooks every day, I have 3 separate knives, aside from the bread knife and smaller steak knives and butter knives. The main knives I use is something quite large and heavy to cut meat with. So as you can see, this is really a chef's knife, what they call a chef's knife, but it's good to get through it with meat because it's quite heavy. I then have a medium-sized knife, which is this one here. Again, I think it's called a chef's knife, but this one's quite good for vegetables, smaller meats, anything that I really need to cut that does need a little bit of weight behind it, that isn't a paring or vegetable knife. And that's the last one, as you see, is just a vegetable paring knife, something small that I can get into cracks and crevices quite easily. Between these 3 knives, I haven't yet found a situation where I need to use something else. That is aside from butter knives, steak knives and bread knives as well. So that finishes off that category. Okay, so the next category that we'll move on to is baking containers and trays. Now, as you see here, has been an accumulation over a fair few number of years. When I first started out, I had 1, 2, 3, 4 trays and a cake tray, which my mum actually bought me as a moving in present, and which I completely, utterly adored and used to, as you can see, it's been well worn, well used, and hasn't been neglected at all. So anyway, I'll take you through some of these. This is quite a large collection, and as I mentioned, it's been built up over a number of years. But again, coming back to it, if I had to give advice to somebody to move into their own place, what would they buy? This would be quite as it is. So to begin with, we'll start over here. So muffin trays. As you can see, my muffin tray is quite well used because I have used it quite consistently out through my cooking career. This added one here, now this is extravagant, and my mum has only just bought this one for me because I absolutely adore free arms. They're orange almond little cakes, and then you can flavour them with any types of berries, apple, anything that goes with almonds and oranges. What makes this unique is if you flip it over, you can see here, so they're an oval shaped, but they have just this little mould at the bottom. It's an extravagant, but if you like any kind of French cooking into this, you'll love this. Now moving down into this, as you can see, this was one of my very first tins that we used to cook with my nan over love hearts. I still remember for my 5th birthday, my mum made me a vanilla birthday cake, and it was in the shape of a heart. So these aren't really necessary to your cooking. If you don't like love hearts, then great. Nowadays in the store you can get pretty much any shape cooking tin that you like. Go nuts, fill your boots. This here is a loaf tin. So this is really good for baking breads or loaves, especially like fruit loaf. It just comes in really good handy because, as you can see, if you flip it over, it's in the shape. So a good tip for lunches, school work lunches, you can cut it into slices and then freeze it, pop it into the freezer, and you get quite a number of slices depending on how thick and how small you actually slice these things. So wonderful invention. This is also one of the first tins that got handed down from my nan to my mum to me when I first moved out. This is this is our fruit cake tin. So as later on into the website, there'll be a recipe for old-fashioned fruit cake. Time and time and time and time again, this thing is used for our fruit cake, and it just becomes known in our family as the fruit cake tin. But as you can see, it is a square. So it is quite adequate for any kind of square cake that you need. As a slab tin, it's still deep enough, but it's still small enough to hold portions for a small family. So it's not unusable. You can use it for quite a number of things as well. It's just good to have in your kitchen. Now, these things didn't become fashionable until a few years ago. Again, once I graduated from university, one of the gifts was from Mum for one of these things. They are called spring form. Now, in the older days, my nan never used to have these things. So if you have any kind of round cooking tin, then that's great as well. These things are just the added bonus because obviously being spring form, you undo the latch and see this bottom bit comes out. So therefore it's much easier to actually bring this up and bring the cake out. Another thing to have in your cooking cupboard is one of these. Now as you can see, it's got a middle bit into it as well. So these are really good for like carrot cakes, where it's quite a moist cake, but in the middle it has a tendency to flop into it. So if you have this mould in the middle, then it cooks quite consistently around it. You can get different sizes of this. This is just a small one, obviously, because we don't have a very large family. So our cakes are quite adequate to these sizes, but you can get bigger ones of these. So just adapt to your family size. Now, cooking quiches, quinces, anything like that, I do have one of these, and again, the middle does come out. It's just a case of a stick. But this has got holes in the bottom, as you can see, to aerate the pastry into it. This is quite a metal one, and later on I'll actually show you a ceramic one. Now on the bottom here, this is my partner's most favourite and most used dish. And I'm sure you can actually guess what it is. It's a pizza dish. So quite large in length, and as you can probably see by the cut marks onto this tin, we've used it quite consistently. Pizza is a wonderful thing, especially if you like the thin base. You can adapt anything like tortilla shells, burrito shells as your base, whack some tomato on it, fill your favourite topping, pop it into the oven for a few moments, and it's done. Lunch, dinner, a few moments, done. Now moving on to more serious roasting trays as well. When I first started out, I had this top tray, and as you can see, this was quite a small baking tray, obviously because there was only 1 or 2 members of our family that we were cooking for. And I used this tray really consistently every time I roasted, and it hasn't let me down. It's come from my mum's generation. I've adapted that many recipes into this dish. It's not funny. It's small enough so that you can actually cover it with alfoil as well. But again, we didn't have a very large family to feed, so it was really quite adequate for us. But then during the years, my mum has bought me a roasting tray, and if you were to ask me to do this again, I would say worth the investment for one of these. Now this is quite a large tray, so please do, when you're considering these things, measure your oven, because we almost got caught out with the lengths and the depths of these things that it almost didn't fit in the oven. So tip to note, please measure your oven. This is really quite good to have this wire rack into it, so you can sit your meat on this, and then you can put your vegetables underneath, and of course the vegetables will roast as your meat loses its juices on top, so it flavours it double-edged sword really quite nicely. And then we've just got some plain slice trays that I use as vegetables. These are also good for thin slices as well, or for cookies, so adapt either way. And that finishes off this category.